Hi, everybody. Welcome to another English class here on Verbling.com. My name is Lisa, and I'm one of the English teachers here at Verbling. And in this hour, we're going to be doing a reading and speaking class. We're going to be reading a New York Times article about the Brazilian elections, which took place yesterday in Brazil. And what happened? They had their round one, and now they're going to have round two, which will be in a couple of weeks. So we're going to do some reading, talk about the elections, and also just talk about elections in general. Hopefully we will have some time at the end of the class to discuss the article. You guys can make some comments, maybe talk about your own system in your own country. So we'll just see how many people show up for this hour and how much time we have to read and discuss. So if you have a reservation for the class, of course, you can use that now. You always have the first 2 minutes to do that. But if you don't have a reservation and you want to join us, then we can have up to 9 people here in the Verbling chat, the group, the Google Hangouts classroom, which is what we have for the classroom here. So 10 people total, 9 students, and 1 teacher. So if you want to join us and do some reading and learn some new vocabulary and some phrases and stuff, it's at least upper intermediate to advanced level whenever you read an article in the New York Times. It's pretty advanced, but I think usually with my help, most people can understand it, and then of course you can have an opportunity to learn some new words and things. So, welcome, guys. Hi, Fausto. How are you been?
Hello, teacher.
Hi.
How are you?
Well, how are you doing?
Good. And you, teacher?
I'm good, thanks. Long time no see.
Yes, I know that. Well, in fact, I have been working overtime.
Oh.
So when I get home, I think that I usually feel so tired, and I decided to go to the bed early, because the next day I need to wake up.
I understand. Yeah.
Yes, but I think that hard times pass away. I think. I don't know.
It's a little easier now, huh?
Yes, this time is easy, so I would like to spend my time trying to improve my English.
Great. Well, wonderful. Welcome. I haven't been teaching classes at this time. For me right now it's 8 p.m., so 8 in the evening, and I know for you guys it's even later. I usually teach classes more in the morning time, from my morning time. So, but I picked this one up because it was empty, so I thought I would go ahead and teach a class tonight, so I'm glad to see you guys. Hi, Christian. How are you?
Hi, Lisa. I'm fine.
Welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you.
And Juan Carlos, hi there.
Hi, Lisa. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Okay, wonderful. Welcome to class. And Julian, how are you? Julian, are you there? I don't hear your voice, so you might want to check your microphone or your connection. Sometimes you just have to refresh your page. The way that you can tell whether or not your microphone is working is when you're talking. If you see the little dots, they turn green down below, and also on your little square where like the picture is of you, if you see the green dots going up and down, that means your microphone is working and we'll probably be able to hear you. But if for some reason you don't see that, you can always just refresh your page. Sometimes you have to adjust something, maybe with headphones or something like that. But usually the first thing to try is always to just reload your page. One time I had to actually restart my computer to get the microphone working again, so sometimes that happens as well. So Julian, did it work?
Okay,
good. It worked.
It's working this
device.
Thanks.
It's working. Yeah, great. Julian, where are you calling from?
I am calling from Colombia, Bogota, Colombia.
Bogota. Okay, well, welcome. Welcome to class. And William, how are you doing? William, are you there? Same thing with you, William. I'm not hearing you, so maybe try reloading. Unless you can see, yeah, maybe he'll reload. Okay, guys. Well, this is what I have. I I kind of picked this thinking that maybe some Brazilians would come, but then I realized it's probably pretty late for them. It's midnight. I've been talking to some of my Brazilian students today a little bit about the elections. I don't know if it has much to do with people in Colombia or Mexico, for example, but it is a large South American country, so I know they have lots of connections with other countries around the world. So it's a pretty big country to look at in terms of what's happening there. So we're going to look at that. We're going to read this article. Like I said, I got it from the New York Times. So here's the New York Times page where I got it. So these are the two people who are going to be going to the second round. This lady right here, she's the current president. You might already know this, Dilma Rousseff, and she won enough votes to go on to the next round. And then here's, so she's called the incumbent. The person who's running again is the incumbent, and they usually have the advantage in most elections. But here's this guy, Aécio Neves, who's one of the other opponents, and he got enough votes also to move on to a second round. So they're going to have another round in a couple of weeks. So let's read what happened yesterday in Brazil. So I think most of you guys have been in my classes before. The way I like to do this is I like to read out loud about a paragraph or two. I might read two at a time. We have not so many people in the class right now. I'm reading out loud so that you guys can hear how I pronounce the words. Some of the words might be new for you, and so sometimes it's nice if when you come across a new word you can hear somebody read it, and so you kind of can learn the pronunciation that way. And then I'm going to have you guys read, so that's your turn to practice reading out loud, which is a good chance for you to practice your pronunciation and your intonation and all of that. And then I have highlighted a few words throughout, and these are usually words that I like to just go over to make sure you understand what's happening. You don't need to understand every single word that you read in an article like this. The main idea is to get what we call the gist, or the main story, kind of understand who's it about, what they're saying. Just the main ideas are good. And then of course you can use this article if you want. You can look up more words and make sure you understand it. If you want, you can ask me any questions you have related to the article if you need me or want me to explain something in a different way, or if you sometimes students ask how to use it. Maybe they think of an example and ask, would it be correct to use it this way? So that's also a good way to figure out how to use these words. Yeah, and then we'll just, if we have time after we read, we'll have a little conversation about it. Okay, so in Brazil's election, incumbent emerges as front runner but faces runoff. President Dilma Rousseff emerged on Sunday as the front runner in one of the most tightly contested presidential elections since democracy was reestablished in Brazil in the 1980s. But she failed to win a majority of the vote, opening the way for a runoff with Aécio Neves, the pro-business scion of a powerful political family. The strong showing by Mr. Neves, a senator from the state of Minas Gerais, enabled him to surpass Marina Silva, an environmental leader who soared in opinion polls in September, only to be eliminated from the race.
Yeah.
Okay. Christian, you want to start us off and read that, what I just read there? Great.
In Brazil election, incumbent emerged as front-runner but faces runoff.
Yeah, if everybody can mute their microphones, that makes it a little bit easier to hear. I'm just going to mute you guys. Thanks. Okay, sorry, Christian, go ahead.
President Dilma Rousseff emerged on Sunday as the front-runner in one of the most tightly contested presidential elections since democracy was reestablished in Brazil in the 1980s. But of the vote, opening the way for a runoff with Aécio Neves, the pro-business scion of a powerful political family. The strong showing by Mr. Neves, a senator from the state of Minas Gerais,
Christian? I can't hear you. Something happened to the sound, Christian. You might have to reload. Sometimes Google Hangouts is like this. It might not even be your computer or anything. It just might be the internet connection to Google Hangouts. So maybe if you, I don't know, I'm not seeing any of the green dots on you and I'm not hearing anything. So try restarting. Okay, so all right, so we'll stop there. He enabled him to surpass Marina Silva. So basically, I'm going to go over these words. So the incumbent, like I said, that's the person who already is in office, and they're running again. They're called the incumbent. She emerged, so she came out as the front runner. So in an election, the front runner is the person who got the most votes. But she didn't get enough to just win totally, so now she has to go into another round, a second round. We don't do that here in the United States, but in many places they do. So she faces a runoff. A runoff is an election between two of the top people. So the two top people were Dilma and Aécio. All right, so a tightly contested. Tightly means it's very close. You know, the votes were very close, and contested means there was competition. So it was very close competition in these presidential elections. All right, so it was democracy was reestablished in the 80s. Before that, they had a different military type government, and so now they're going to have a runoff between the two of them. And I put the definition for this scion is just, you know, a member of a very popular or powerful family. So it says that right here. He's a member of a powerful political family in Brazil. He's actually the senator, a senator from this one of the states, Minas Gerais, and he was enabled. So the strong showing by Mr. Neves enabled him. So the strong showing means he got a lot of votes. And because he got a lot of votes, he was able, or this enabled him to surpass Marina. So Marina Silva was another person who was running, but he surpassed her. So he got more votes than she did. Marina Silva, she was an environmental leader who soared in opinion polls. So a couple of weeks ago, she was actually pretty popular. In the opinion polls, she was getting a lot of votes, and so that means she had high scores in the opinion polls. But finally, in the end, yesterday, she was eliminated from the race, so she did not get enough votes to continue on. Ms. Rousseff got 41.5% of the vote against 33.7% for Mr. Neves and 21.3% for Ms. Silva, electoral officials said, with 99% of votes counted. While Ms. Rousseff, 66, is expected to remain the favorite going into the October 26th runoff, the surge by Mr. Neves reflects disenchantment among many voters with Ms. Rousseff's leftist Workers' Party, which is seeking to remain in power amid criticism over a sluggish economy and a scandal shaking the nation's oil industry. Okay, Fausto. Read that there.
Okay. Ms. Rousseff got 41.5% of the vote against 33.7% for Mr. Neves and 21.3% for Ms. Silva, electoral officials said, with 99% of the votes counted, while Ms. Rousseff, 66, is expected to remain the favorite going into the October 26th runoff. The surge by Mr. Neves reflects disenchantment among many voters with Ms. Rousseff's leftist Workers' Party, which is seeking to remain in power amid criticism over a sluggish economy and scandals shaking the nation's oil industry.
Okay, so in this paragraph, it just tells us the different percentage of the vote, different percentages of the vote that they each got. So the top two get to go to the next round, which is the runoff. So had she got, like, I think more than 50%, for example, then she would have just won outright, and then there would not have been a runoff. But she didn't, so now these two people will have a runoff. But she is expected, so they think she's going to still be the favorite. To remain means to stay or to still be the favorite. October 26th, which is when the runoff is. And the surge, so the surge is like all of a sudden a bunch of people really wanted to vote for him. So he wasn't doing so well in the polls, but then a bunch of people came and voted for him. So that's like a surge. Just all of a sudden this power came in. And they're saying, that the person who wrote this article is saying, this reflects, and the way we pronounce this is disenchantment. So with the CH sound, ch, disenchantment. It just means unhappy. If you're unhappy, you are disenchanted. So a lot of people have not been happy with the current president and her party, which is a leftist party called the Workers' Party. So they haven't really liked some of the things that she has done or that the government has done. But she's still trying to remain in power amid criticism. So even though there's criticism, she still wants to be in power. And there's been criticism over a sluggish economy. So sluggish means like slow, a slow economy. It's not really growing. It's not really doing great. It's kind of just going along. And also a scandal, so a political scandal in their oil industry, which they're going to explain a little bit here. Despite a souring of the national mood during Ms. Rousseff's tenure, including huge anti-government street protests in 2013, her campaign was buoyed by policies that have focused on preserving jobs and expanding social welfare benefits. Mr. Neves, a leader of the Brazilian Social Democracy Party, which put in place an economic stabilization program when it held power from 1995 to 2002, has criticized Ms. Rousseff for a scandal at Petrobras, the national oil company. The episode involved a former executive's revealing a huge overbilling scheme intended to support political figures in Ms. Rousseff's governing alliance. Okay, Juan Carlos. You can read all of that.
Okay. Despite a soaring of the national mood during Ms. Rousseff's tenure, including huge anti-government street protests in 2013, her campaign was buoyed by policies that have focused on preserving jobs and expanding social welfare benefits. Mr. Neves, a leader of the Brazilian Social Democracy Party, which put in place an economic stabilization program when it held power from 1995 to 2002, has criticized Mrs. Rousseff for a scandal at Petrobras, the national oil company. The episode involves a former executive revealing a huge overbilling scheme intended to support political figures in Ms. Rousseff's governing alliance.
Good. Okay, so when we say the word despite, so it means even though. So there has been a souring, so it's kind of, not so wonderful. So during her tenure, that means when her time in office, the national feeling or the mood has not been great. There were a lot of anti-government protests before the World Cup. Her campaign was buoy is one of those things that's out in the ocean and it's floating out in the ocean to mark something. So it's held up by the water. It's floating. So they're saying that her campaign was held up or supported by some policies that were focused on preserving jobs, so keeping jobs for people, making sure people had jobs, and also expanding the social welfare benefits. So to expand means to make bigger. So the way I understand it, her government helped more poor people have social welfare benefits. So they grew the programs. They made them bigger. Okay, so what Mr. Neves did, his party actually, they did some economic stabilization. So when you stabilize the economy, you make it stay so it's not, you don't have a lot of inflation, you don't have a lot of unemployment, but you just try to stabilize it. So that's what his party tried to do when they were in power last time. And they've been criticizing Dilma Rousseff because there have been some scandals at Petrobras, which is the national oil company. And the problem was they were overbilling. So there was a plan, a scheme, to overbill. So that means to charge too much, and then the political figures, the politicians, they got the extra money. So this was kind of a problem. Obviously, that's part of the corruption in the government. But Ms. Rousseff's emphasis on protecting gains in living standards along with spending on attack ads helped fortify her campaign over the past 2 months. Many voters expressed concern that rivals could disassemble the web of anti-poverty programs begun by the Workers' Party, and those worries eclipsed resentment over corruption. There's a lot of corruption in the government, but there's corruption in every government, said Luis Carlos Silva, 47, a waiter at a restaurant in downtown Rio de Janeiro. Okay, Julian?
Hello.
Hi, do you want to read this part here?
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
But Mr. Rousseff's emphasis on protecting gains in living standards, along with spending on attack ads, helped fortify her campaign over the past 2 months. Many voters expressed concern that rivals could disassemble the web of anti-poverty programs begun by the Workers' Party, and those worries eclipsed resentment over corruption. There's lot of corruption in the government, but there's corruption in every government, said Luis Carlos Silva, 47, a waiter at a restaurant in downtown Rio de Janeiro.
Good. Okay, so her emphasis on something. So when you emphasize something, that means you make sure everybody notices it. You really want people to remember something about you. So when you're trying to win an election, you try to get people to understand the things you want them to understand and focus on that. So she wanted them to understand how her government have protected the gains in living standards. So a gain is, it's been getting better. So the living standards, that means like what you can afford, a house, a car, education, that type of stuff. It's been going up for many Brazilians. She also spent money on attack ads, so advertising that was attacking the other opponents, and this helped to fortify. So to fortify is make stronger, to help her make her campaign stronger, and this has been happening over the last 2 months, in the past 2 months. In this next sentence, many voters expressed concern that rivals, a rival would be like your opponent, the person you're going against. If Neves Aécio wins, for example, many people think that president, like if he were to be president, he would disassemble, so take apart the anti-poverty programs that Dilma's party had already begun. So they're worried about that. They're worried that if Aécio gets into the presidency, then he and his party will take apart those programs that have helped the poor people. But those are not and those worries, that worry about taking apart those programs, eclipsed. So it kind of covered up the resentment and the frustration people had over the corruption. So it's still, even though they know their government is corrupt, they still want Dilma to be there because they like the anti-poverty programs. He emphasized that Ms. Rousseff's party, which has been in power since 2003, had helped many poor Brazilians ascend to the middle class, especially in Ceará, his home state in northeast Brazil. Life has improved with Dilma, Mr. Silva said, referring informally to the president by her first name, a common practice for politicians in Brazil. The election has been followed closely throughout Latin America, with Ms. Rousseff's government supporting leftist allies in Venezuela and Cuba. The campaigning has also fueled volatility in financial markets as big investors expressed anxiety over some of Ms. Rousseff's policies, which have expanded the influence of big state companies in the economy. You want to read? You have to unmute your microphone, William.
Yes.
There you go. All right, wonderful. You can read all of that.
Okay. He emphasized that Mrs. Rousseff's party, which has been in power since 2003, had helped many poor Brazilians ascend to the middle class, especially in Ceará, his home state in northern Brazil. Life has improved with Dilma, Mr. Silva said, referring informally to the president by her first name, a common practice for politicians in Brazil. The election has been government supporting leftist allies in Venezuela and Cuba. The campaigning has also fueled volatility in financial markets as big investors express anxiety over some of Mrs. Rousseff's policies, which have expanded the influence of big state companies in the economy.
Good. Okay, yeah, stop there. All right, so he emphasized, again, the word to emphasize something you want somebody to know. So he was emphasizing that Dilma's party, Rousseff's party, has been in power since 2003, and that they have helped many poor Brazilians ascend to the middle class. So ascend means to go up, to like climb a mountain, you go up. So you're climbing up the economic ladder, for example. So you're coming out of poverty and you're coming into the middle class, especially in his home state. So the person who's talking about it, he's food with Dilma. So that's a popular belief there. A lot of people see that their lives have improved since she has been the president. So let's see. Common practice is calling them by their first name. So I hear that a lot. People in Brazil call the president Dilma instead of President Rousseff or something like that, which they do in other countries. Okay, has been closely followed. So followed closely just means people in the Latin American countries are wanting to know what's going to happen. Is it going to be the same party, this kind of more leftist party, or maybe a business-oriented party is going to come to power? So that's what what other countries want to know. Why, what's going to happen and how is that going to affect us? All right. So the campaigning, that's when the people who are in the election, like us, ISEO and Dilma, they're going around telling people, vote for me, I will do this if I'm president, this kind of thing. This campaigning has fueled volatility in the financial markets. So you got to kind of understand that all together. So you have financial markets, and when this campaigning is happening, what's happening is volatility, which means a lot of action going, a lot of buying and selling, and that's called volatility. If it's really calm, then there's not much happening. But volatility is lots of ups and downs in the financial markets because some investors are worried. They have anxiety over some of the president's policies. She has been expanding, making bigger, again, expanding the influence of big state companies. So instead of privatizing, she's more supporting the idea that the state owns the companies. So that would be different than Aécio, for example. Okay, Mr. William, where are you from, by the way?
I am
okay,
from Colombia.
Also.
Near to Brazil.
Is everybody from Colombia? Juan Carlos, are you from Colombia too? I can't remember. Juan Carlos? Oh no. I think we're having problems with the Hangouts here. People's sound is going off. Okay, well, I think so. Mr. Neves, 54, has signaled that he would put in place policies aimed at calming the markets, like easing controls on fuel prices, so gasoline prices, and improving the transparency of public finances. A top advisor of his campaign is Arminio Fraga, a Princeton-trained former central bank president who now operates an investment firm based in Rio. In an election full of twists, the campaigning was upended in August when Eduardo Campos, a candidate and governor of Pernambuco, was killed in a plane crash. His running mate, Ms. Silva, a former environment minister who was born into poverty in the far reaches of the Amazon, took his place on the ticket and emerged as a leader in the race. Okay, Juan Carlos, let's see if your microphone is working. Does anybody hear him? Because I can't hear you, Juan Carlos. Julian, can you hear him?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Can you hear Juan Carlos?
No.
No.
Oh, I can't.
Juan Carlos, why don't you try refreshing your page? I don't know, but I think this has been a problem with this particular Hangouts. The sound is not great, so that's probably what happened to the other people who dropped out. Julian, why don't you continue reading, and we'll hopefully hear from Juan Carlos soon. So you can read those 2 paragraphs.
Okay. Mr. Neves, 54, has signaled that they will put in place policies aimed at calming the markets, like easing control on fuel price and improving the transparency of public finances. A top advisor of his campaign is Arminio Fraga, a Princeton-trained former central bank president who now operates an investment firm based in Rio. In an election full of twists, the campaign was opened in August when Eduardo Campos, a candidate and governor of Pernambuco, was killed in a plane crash. His running mate, Ms. Silva, a former environment minister who was born into poverty in the far reaches of the Amazon, took his place on the ticket and emerged as a leader in the race.
Okay. So they're just explaining a little bit more about each person. So Neves, Mr. Neves, has signaled. This means he has given a signal, kind of a sign, or he has said something about what he would do. Like if he were to become president, he would put in place some policies. So he would make some new laws, for example, that have a goal or an aim to calm the markets. So, for example, easing controls on fuel prices. So right now the government is controlling the gasoline prices. So he would ease that. And then also improve the transparency. Transparency means see, what you can see. You know, so what the public can see, what the politicians are doing with public monies, public finances. So there would be less corruption. That's the idea, anyways. So one of his top advisors is Princeton. That's a popular Ivy League university here in the United States. So he was trained in the United States, and he was a former central bank president. All right, so now he's operating or running an investment firm. So big guy within the money area. In an election full of twists. So twists are the changes. Things change, and so one of the big changes that turned everything kind of upside down was when one of the guys who was running, he was a candidate, he was killed in a plane crash just a couple of months ago, and so that's why Ms. Silva became a top candidate, because she was placed on the ticket for her party. So she was just going to be his running mate, kind of like vice president type thing. But since he was killed in a plane crash, he died, she was on the ticket, and so she emerged. To emerge means she came out kind of as a leader. In the last couple of months, people thought she was going to maybe have a runoff with Dilma, but some things happened. Let's see, Juan Carlos, say something now. See if it works.
I hope so.
Yes, it does. Okay, I hear you. Good.
Okay.
All right. Yes.
I had a question about they say the Eduardo Campos was killed in a plane crash, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I suppose he wasn't killed. He
He
just
died.
died in a plane crash.
Yeah, that's a good eyes seeing that. That's a difference there. Yeah. When you say he was killed in a plane crash, it kind of makes you think maybe something happened, but yeah. But as far as I know, nothing weird happened. Like, nobody actually tried to kill him. He just died in a plane crash. So, yeah.
Yes, because it was an accident. So
Yes, exactly.
Guilt is not accident. It's with conscience, with is
Yeah.
an action to murder someone.
Yes, yes. I could agree with you with that. It's kind of a weird way to phrase that. We do say that. You will hear 33 people were killed. Hear that if you're watching the news, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it was like bad intentions or somebody wanted to kill them, but sometimes it does mean that. So it's a kind of a fine line. So it's safer to say, so many people died in a plane crash, because then you don't give the impression that maybe, you think that somebody was, there was a reason for that or something, So yeah, that's a good point there. Okay, and I don't know, you never know with those kinds of things, but I think it was an accident. It was bad weather, and they were pretty close to the airport and everything. It was just not a good thing. Something happened with the plane or the pilot or something. Okay, so she was doing okay, this lady, Marina Silva, but missteps by Ms. Silva, like backtracking on support for same-sex marriage and offering vague descriptions of how she could reshape Brazil's political institutions, sowed confusion among voters, and she lost ground as the election neared. Truthfully, none of the candidates are great, said Lucio Claudio de Souza, 49, who runs a newsstand in Brasilia. Still, he said he believed that Mr. Neves would crack down on crime more effectively than other candidates, pointing to a proposal to lower the age at which minors can be tried as adults to 16. I think Aécio is the least worst, he said. Okay, Juan Carlos.
Okay, but Miss steps by Miss Silva, like backtracking on support for same-sex marriage and offering vague description of how she could reshape Brazil's political institutions, sowed confusion among voters, and she lost ground as the election neared. Truthfully, none of the candidates are great, said Lucio Claudio de Souza, 49, who runs a newsstand in Brasilia. Still, he said he believed that Mr. Neves would crack down on crime more effectively than other candidates, pointing to a proposal to lower the age at which minors can be tried as adults to 16. I think Aesio is the least words, he said.
Okay, good. So, so she was doing okay, but then in the last couple of weeks she had some missteps. So when you use that word misstep, it means like you did something a little bit wrong. It didn't help you, kind of like you made some mistakes. So she made some missteps when she was having the debates, I think it was. So she backtracked on some things. So when you backtrack, that means you tell the public you're going to do something, like I'm going to vote for same-sex marriage. I'm going to support that. And then later you say, well, I don't know. I'm not really sure. Maybe you even say, I'm not. Now I'm against it. So you kind of take back what you said. So that's called backtracking on something. So people can't really trust you if you do that very much. So that's one thing they didn't like, I guess. And she was also giving vague descriptions. So a vague description is not very much information. So kind of talking about how you're going to change something, but it's not very clear. It's vague. So again, that doesn't help people trust you or understand what you're saying. And to sow, usually we sow, like we reap what we sow. That's an expression. To sow confusion means she kind of caused confusion. She planted, we talk about sowing seeds in the ground to grow plants, but if you sow confusion, it means like you caused people to become confused. And so she lost ground. That means she lost, like she was getting ahead and more she was gaining ground. When you gain ground, you get more voters. And then when you lose ground, then you lose your voters and people don't want to vote for you. So that's in terms of the elections. All right, but truthfully, this is the same pretty much everywhere around the world, probably, where there are democratic elections. You know, none of the candidates are great. So he says he believes that Mr. Neves would crack down on crime. That's an expression you hear a lot. It just means that you think that politician will be tough on crime and make the streets safer and put those people, the criminals, behind jail. That kind of stuff is how they talk about it. One of the proposals, one of the plans, would be to lower the age for having minors be tried. Tried means when they go to jail. I mean, not go to jail, go to court to see if they're going to be guilty, and if they're guilty, then they go to jail. But right now, I think it's probably 18, but he wants to lower it. So if there's some, you know, if a 16-year-old does a crime, they can be tried in court as adults. So he thinks that Aesio is the least worst. And I was saying that in the Verbling chat, but I messed it up. We say, yeah, we're voting for the, you know, the best of two evils. So usually most candidates don't have a lot of great support, but people have to vote for somebody. You have to choose somebody to vote for. Okay, reflecting Brazil's consolidation of democracy since military rule ended in 1985, voting in the elections unfolded largely without problems across the country, the Brazilian news media reported. Voters also chose governors and legislators in the election. Mr. Neves' Social Democracy Party bolstered its support in Sao Paulo, Brazil's largest state, but lost ground to the Workers' Party in his home state of Minas Gerais. While Brazilian elections generally proceed without major claims of irregularities, fatigue and disenchantment among voters are also on the rise. For instance, a majority of the electorate wants an overhaul of legislation making it mandatory in Brazil for people between the ages of 18 to 70 to vote. Okay, William. All of that.
Reflecting Brazil's consolidation of democracy since military rule, and then in 1985, the election unfolded largely without problems across the country. The Brazilian news media reported. Voters also chose governors and legislators in the election. Mr. Neves' Social Democracy Party bolstered its support in São Paulo, Brazil's largest state, but lost ground to the Workers' Party in his home state of Minas Gerais. While Brazilian elections generally proceed without major claims of irregularities, fatigue or disenchantment among voters are also on the rise. For instance, a majority of the electorate wants an overhaul of legislation making it mandatory in Brazil for people between the ages of 18 to 70 to vote.
Good. All right. So reflecting Brazil's consolidation of. So this is the first part of the sentence. Then this is kind of has three parts between those commas there. Basically, it's showing that democracy is doing pretty well. So consolidation of, it means just that they have come together and it's kind of now a good thing. The democracy there is pretty strong after the military rule ended, because the reason why it is strong is because these elections, they unfold or they take place or they happen without too many problems. So they do not have too many problems across the country. They were also voting for governors and legislators at the same time, not just the president. Let's see. His Social Democracy Party bolstered its support. So that increased. So they got more support. So to bolster your support means to increase your support, get more people voting for you. In Sao Paulo, which is Brazil's largest state, but they lost ground. So then it decreased their voters, and they lost it to the Workers' Party in his own state of Minas Gerais, so where he's actually from. It says while, so even though the Brazilian elections generally proceed, they usually happen without any big claims of irregularities like voter fraud or people cheating or something like that. Voters are tired. They're fatigued. They have fatigue or they are tired and they're disenchanted. They're not very happy with the government. So this is on the rise. The idea of being fatigued and having disenchantment or being disenchanted is on the rise, so it's increasing. And a lot of people, a majority of the voters, the electorate, that's what you call the voters, they want an overhaul of the legislation. So they want to change. They want to change the legislation because right now voting is mandatory. You have to vote. If you're living in Brazil and you're between the ages of 18 to 70, you have to vote if you're a citizen there. All right, so they want to change that. Ms. Silva tried to tap into that sentiment with a diffuse message of new politics. Of all the candidates, Marina is the only one who really represents a renovation, said Carlos Alberto Ferreira, 62, a pensioner who works as a security guard at a parking lot to supplement his meager retirement income. She talks directly to the people. All right, let's see how much. Okay. All right, let's do that there. Juan Carlos, you want to read that little bit there?
Okay. Mr. Silva tried. Okay, Mr. Silva tried to tap into the sentiments with a diffuse message of new politics. Also, the candidates, Marina is the only one who really represents a renovation, said Carlos Alberto Ferreira, 62, a pensioner who works as a security guard and at parking lots to supplement his meager retirement income. She talks directly to the people.
So far in the article, we've had different people telling why they support Dilma or Aécio, and this person is supporting Marina. So Marina tried to tap into the feeling of people being disenchanted, frustrated, not liking the corruption, that kind of stuff. She tried to, when you say tap into it, it means she tried to talk to that idea. She tried to make her message about that feeling that people had, but she had a very diffuse message, or a very kind of vague, unclear, not a really strong message. It was just like, oh, we're going to have new politics. That's not very clear. People don't really know what you mean. But this person, he believes that she was the only one who represents a renovation, so something new. When you renovate, for example, a house, you make an old house like a new house. So you renovate it. He's a pensioner. This means he's a retired person. So he's working, though, a little bit as a security guard in a parking lot to supplement his income. So that means to make a little bit more money because he has a meager retirement income. So meager means small. So it's not enough. And so he needs to add more money to his income by working a little bit, even though he's already retired from his regular career. And he says she, meaning Marina, talks directly to the people. So he feels like she's one of him, kind of probably like that. Mr. Neves has to lure the support of voters like Mr. Ferreira if he is to mount a more serious challenge to Ms. Rousseff. But Mr. Neves' party faces some skepticism from poorer voters and corruption problems of its own, including a bribery and price-fixing scandal over contracts to supply subway equipment in Sao Paulo. The race between Ms. Rousseff, a former leftist guerrilla, and Mr. Neves, whose grandfather was elected president in 1985 but fell ill and died before he could take office, suggests that polarization could grow more acute. Okay, Julian?
Yep.
Yep, Mr. Neves.
Okay. Mr. Neves has to lure the support of voters like Mr. Ferreira if he is to mount a more serious challenge to Ms. Rousseff. But Mr. Neves' party faced some skepticism from poorer voters and corruption problems of its own, including a bribery and price-fixing scandal over contracts to supply subway equipment in São Paulo. The race between Ms. Rousseff and a former leftist guerrilla and Mr. Neves, whose grandfather was elected president in 1985, but fell ill and died before he could take office, suggests that polarization could grow more acute.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay, so Mr. Neves has to lure the support. To lure means to try to get the support. Yeah, like you use a lure on a fishing pole. That's the thing that gets the fish to bite. So you're luring the fish, so he has to lure the voters to come vote for him if he wants to mount a more serious challenge. So to mount a challenge means to make a challenge against her. If he really wants to be serious about trying to beat her, he has to do more to convince the voters to vote for him. He has his own problems. Skepticism from poor voters. So poor people in Brazil don't really believe him. They're skeptical about what he can do for them. And he has corruption problems in his own party, including bribery, which is when you pay people off, or a price-fixing scandal about some subway equipment, so fixing the prices so that they benefit, politicians and people. Let's see. So this race, the runoff here is going to be between Ms. Rousseff. She's a former, so she used to be, before she was president, she used to be a leftist guerrilla fighter. And Mr. Neves, his grandfather actually was elected president, but he got sick. He fell ill, which means he got sick, and he died before he could take office, so before he actually became the president. So this suggests that polarization could grow more acute. So that could polarize the country even more. Polarization means you have the right and the left, and people are going to like go to each side. So instead of coming together in unity or agreement, you have two different separate sides that people are really going for. The two people, candidates, represent rival ideologies, with Ms. Rousseff hewing to state capitalism, so that's one of her ideologies, and Mr. Neves contending that the state's role in the economy should be reduced. Pointing to Ms. Silva's new role as a potential kingmaker in the election, Fernando Enrique Cardoso, the former president and a supporter of Mr. Neves, starkly told reporters on Sunday what needs to happen now if their party is to unseat Ms. Rousseff. Marina needs to come over to our side, he said. Okay, they need help from Marina. Okay, William, finish up those last words there.
Okay, the two represent rival ideologies, with Mrs. Rousseff hewing to state capitalism and Mr. Neves contending that the state's role in the economy should be reduced. Pointing to Ms. Silva, a new role, a potential kingmaker in the election. Fernando Enriquez Cardoso, the former president and a supporter of Mr. Neves, starkly told reporters on Sunday what needs to happen now if their party is to unseat Ms. Rousseff. Marina needs to come over to our right, he said.
All right, so they represent rival, so those two people, two opponents, do different ideologies. Ms. Rousseff is supporting or, saying she supports state capitalism, so capitalism but run by the state, not private businesses. And Mr. Neves is different. He contends, or he says that he wants the state's role to be reduced, so more like free market with private businesses and stuff instead of capital, companies owned by the state. So that's a difference there in how they look at the role of the government. And so maybe Ms. Silva is going to be a kingmaker. So she's going to be an important person, perhaps, in helping somebody win. And so this guy who used to be the president, Fernando Enrique Cardoso, he says he starkly told reporters. Starkly just means he was very serious there, like very blunt and straightforward, that what they have to do to win, so to unseat the president, to get her out of there, is that Marina needs to come over to our side. So she has to join Aesio's side and bring her people with her, and then Aesio will be able to win. That's kind of the idea there. Okay, we don't have much time to talk, but what do you guys think about this election? Was it something you had been hearing about or following at all? Do you think it affects you in any way, or what do you think about the Brazilian election so far? Anybody have any ideas, Julian?
No, it's the same polarization here in Colombia.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
With some difference, because we don't have a strong leftist party like Brazil's Party of Workers, but it's the same thing. Each one take the arguments arise the other party.
Same kind of ideas then, huh?
Yeah, with the same things. It's the same problem here. The poor people have afraid for I don't know for not for lost the things that they are gained in the process of the before government. It's the same history in each one election, maybe.
So do you think that Brazil, being such a large country in South America, that whatever happens in Brazil might also happen in other countries, or no? Like, for example, if Aécio wins, do you think that would make it more possible for like the more business-oriented people to win in other countries in South America?
Oh, I don't know. Some years in the past, I stayed in Sao Paulo.
Oh,
when the before president, I don't remember the name of the
Lula.
president. Lula.
Lula.
Well, Lula
Uh-huh.
was a president, and the discussion was the same in the Sao Paulo streets between the people, because like Brazil, all South America have an extreme difference between the people in the different regions. Exist regions with a high, very rich people, and other regions with extremely poor people.
Sure.
And the discussion with politicians is the same discussion when political leftists give more to the poor people, the right hand parties accused to this politician of the populist or wherever. I think is the same problem. I believe that is because we have a very extremely differential social differences between our people.
Yeah. Yeah, it might be a little different if more people were more equal, like more economically speaking.
Yeah, it's the same.
That's hard.
Maybe here in Colombia, the effect could be in the negotiation, in the peace negotiation that actually is running in the Cuba. I don't know if you know this. Right? Maybe because Brazil is a traditionally support of peace process in Colombia. Okay.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I know that the United States, they always kind of butt into the other governments too. So I don't think that they necessarily help. They don't have a big history of helping. So that's another factor, is how do the foreign governments affect your government? Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks, guys. I want to let you go in case you want to go to another class or if you want to go to bed. I know it's late for you guys. So thanks for coming to class. It was a really difficult article. Hopefully you guys, I think you understood the basic ideas at least, and some words maybe were new for you. So it's a good chance to read this type of an article, political kind of article. Type of conversation. Yeah, thanks for coming, you guys. Take care.
Thank you.
All right. I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.
Have a good night.
Thank you. You too. Good night.